This mouse was condemned to run forward on a spherical treadmill, and as it did, the world around it also moved in a predictable manner. The faster the mouse ran, the faster the visual scene flowed on the surrounding screens. But then, researchers introduced an element of surprise, a black burst of bubble, which the mouse was not expecting. This caused the mouse to jump up, scared. But why were researchers torturing the poor mouse like this? Well, as it jumped up in surprise, scientists recorded from a microscope hooked to the mouse's brain, and were able to look at the activity of neurons while the mouse was scared, with the aim of understanding how the brain handles uncertainty. In particular, they were testing a model of the brain called predictive coding. Predictive coding is a theoretical framework that seeks to explain the activity of a neural network in biological systems. Modeling brain activity has long been the holy grail of artificial intelligence pioneers, who built and refined the method of backpropagation, where the output of a neural network is compared to a training dataset, and errors are sent back through the network to update the weights of neurons at every layer. Amazing as backprop is, it is not biologically feasible for the simple reason that the real brain doesn't have the necessary backward connections from the output layer to hidden layers in order to propagate the error gradients in a synchronized manner. Each neuron is only aware of its immediate surroundings and, therefore, must receive the necessary error signal from its neighboring neuron. Every local computational unit then has two parts: an internal representation neuron, that maintains the present state of that layer, and an error neuron, which computes the difference between sensory information that flows up through the network, and the predictions from higher-order regions that flow down. The computed errors from different inputs are integrated in the internal representation neuron to update the state variable and define future predictions for this node in the network. So, this is a pretty sophisticated framework. But what evidence is there that such an algorithm actually exists in the brain? The earliest evidence comes from experiments with visual processing. The classical view is that the visual cortex forms a hierarchy of feature detectors. At each layer, there are neurons sensitive to different features in the visual input, with neurons at the retina responding to simple features such as patches of light and dark, while neurons at the top of the hierarchy respond to complex features such as faces. The feature detectors at higher levels of the hierarchy are computed by combining several lower-level, simpler feature detectors. For instance, as a crude illustration, a face detector might be created by combining several spot detectors, eyes, with some bar detectors, mouths and noses. The visual field is believed to be partitioned into distinct receptive fields, such that certain neurons are tuned to fire only if they detect something in their field. For example, if there is a straight bar in one receptive field, only the corresponding neuron will fire. If the bar is in a different field, a different neuron will fire. If the bar stretches across multiple receptive fields, we would expect all of them to fire. However, experiments showed that when presented with a longer bar, the center neuron did not fire. This was difficult to explain within the classical framework, where the representation neuron is expected to fire. The observed lack of firing became known as the end-stopping problem. However, it made perfect sense according to predictive coding, because this theory postulated that what we were recording from was actually an error neuron. The neighboring receptive field sent a prediction that there should be a bar. The sensory information coming in also indicated a bar. Therefore, the expectation matched the reality, and so the error neuron did not fire. However, in the case of a shorter bar spanning only one receptive field, the top-down prediction was that there is no bar, so when the bottom-up signal detected a bar, it was perceived as an error, and therefore, a strong response was observed. Depending on the type of prediction that is violated, there is a variety of error signals that an animal can experience. In sensory mismatch experiments, a mouse is shown a series of stimuli repetitively, and then a part of the input is occluded, causing a deviation from expectation. In sequential mismatch experiments, the mouse is habituated to a specific sequence of gratings. This learned sequence is then violated by introducing a grating in the wrong direction. In oddball experiments, a single stimulus is repeated many times, until a new stimulus is suddenly presented at a random time. In sensory motor mismatches, the visual flow follows the animal's running speed, the faster it runs. The faster the gratings move. Then, the visual flow is suddenly halted, such that the mouse is running, but the world is not moving. The way the mouse reacts to this decoupling is a useful indicator of what the mouse was thinking. The bottom-up or sensory input is easy to control via the virtual reality, but it is not easy to tell what the mouse was expecting. Therefore, when it reacts in an unexpected way to the sensory-motor mismatch, this is a proxy for the top-down prediction, and can be used to investigate what happens in the brain during these moments of uncertainty. Across all mismatch types, the attached microscope recorded patterns of neural activity in different parts of the brain that corresponded to dedicated error cells. Neurons whose sole purpose is to compute errors between the external world and the internal model the mouse has about the world. Thus, virtual reality experiments in mice support the view that the brain performs error computations. Predictive coding is today the leading theory for how the brain works.